All right, happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Legal Tech Week, the show in which we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation with our panel of legal tech experts and journalists and bloggers. Uh, and as everybody in the United States knows, there was a very important birthday this week. And no, I'm not talking about our country, but I'm talking about Stephanie Wilkins. So happy birthday to Stephanie.
Thank
Uh,
you. Thank you.
which means you get the honors of going first in terms of introducing yourself.
Yes, I'm Stephanie Wilkins, editor-in-chief of Legal Tech News at ALM. I am 1 year older, and I'm not kidding. Everything has started hurting. There's no reason why, but I've had weird pains today. I'm going to blame this stupid heat. And that's all I got.
Just since your birthday, it just started.
Yeah, literally yesterday.
I don't think it works that way, but okay.
I know.
And yeah, okay. Victor?
Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Lee. I am Assistant Managing Editor for the ABA Journal. I went swimming yesterday for the first time in like months, and like my knee hurt like really badly afterwards. So yeah, I definitely feel that.
All right. And our sound effects manager, Joe Patrice.
All right. Well, let me see here. I'm testing that. But yeah, I'm Joe Patrice from Above the Law.
You need like a groan, an old person groan or something.
Well, and I'm trying desperately to figure out if I can get applause here. Oh, did that work?
No.
Well, trying to get the soundboard set up. But yeah, we're not going to have sound effects, I guess, for a little bit longer, but hopefully someday.
And Niki.
I am Niki Black. I'm the head of SME and external education, in my case, and LawPay. I write legal tech columns for ABA Journal, Above the Law, the Daily Record, and others. And I also oversee and write my case in LawPay's Benchmark and Legal Industry Report. And yesterday I bent down to get something up off the ground and I hurt my knee. And my daughter had to get me a heating pack, and so I just literally just tried to get something on the ground and hurt my knee. So that's how you're really getting old.
I'm so glad this is not just me, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Well, in search of young blood on this panel, I'll turn to Steve Embry.
Hi, Steve Embry. I write the blog Tech Law Crossroads about legal innovation and technology. And for about a month yet, I will still be chair of the ABA Law Practice Division. And to all of the young people with us today that are complaining about aches and pains, I can assure you it only gets worse.
Wonderful. Well, we got for a short week. There's a bit of stuff to talk about this week, but probably the biggest story in our little world here is the whole launch of the so-called Twitter killer, Threads. And Niki, I know you had kind of highlighted that as something you wanted to talk about today. But so what you were probably, you might have even been the first one I know who actually got on there. So what are you thinking about it?
Well, it's interesting because there have been a bunch of others that have come along. But when I signed on, I took Wednesday off. So Thursday I signed on and there were like 3 or 4 posts in a row on LinkedIn of people that I follow in the legal tech space who were mentioning this thing called Threads. And I sort of been out of the loop because of the holiday and I Googled it and I just joined it just because, and lo and behold, there were quite a few people there and it definitely resembles old school Twitter. And of all the places that I've joined since Twitter started its downfall, it's the one that seems to have generated the most buzz. The most people join because it's just so easy. It's like practically the click of a button. But it's kind of hard to make sense of. We've all accumulated different followers in different places. I know you'd mentioned this and when we were talking about it, Bob, but so like I have like people that make jewelry on Instagram. I have style stuff, like women I follow for style, some legal tech people. And so it's just this strange assortment of people once I transfer my followers over. So that's sort of odd as well. And it's just kind of disorganized right now, but it definitely seems like there might be some potential. So I thought it was worth talking about because it's the first thing to really make a buzz since And also the other thing I want to mention that we should talk about is that TweetDeck has changed and may or may not be available if you don't pay soon. And for me, like if I don't have TweetDeck, Twitter is just not usable at this point. So you got to find somewhere else to go, and maybe that's it. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I definitely got the whole like, Twitter from like 10 years ago vibe off of it. Like just, the interface is still very kind of basic. You can't do a whole lot of things. Like, I tried to put one of those animated GIFs on a status update. I couldn't do it because you have to like download it to your phone and then put it on because they don't have the functionality yet. And they don't have like, it's not so easy. Like for me, like I haven't really figured out how to like find people that I know. It's more like people they recommend for me to follow. But so because it's tied to my Instagram account, it's like a lot of dog photos, a lot of like soccer news, a lot of that kind of stuff. So, but it's fun. It's a nice change of pace, and I think the fact that I hate to say it, but like because it's not like Facebook Meta or whatever. It's not like they're saints or anything, but like the fact that they already had like the built-in kind of following, they had like the name recognition, and they had the infrastructure. I think for a lot of people that was sort of that, but that's probably why they flocked to it as opposed to going to like a startup like Mastodon or like Post or whatever those other ones have tried to do. And hey, if it spares us from getting that Mark Zuckerberg versus Elon Musk cage match, I'm all for it. So we'll see.
Exactly.
Well, I
So-
understand that Mr. Musk has already sent a threatening, blustering letter to Mark
Yeah.
Zuckerberg. It's alleging that
So-
he's copying Twitter or something like that. But
Yeah,
like
so
you
I
guys,
put that up.
the thing that I liked about it is that unlike Mastodon and to some extent Blue Sky, it's pretty easy to use, and I think that's sort of the key to making it go, because Twitter was pretty easy to use once it got going, and these other services are not quite so easy. Sorry, Joe, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to jump off of that. I put in the chat my article about that blustery letter that Quinn Emanuel sent on behalf of Elon, complaining that their intellectual property is being stolen, seemingly because Facebook has hired some of the computer programmers that Elon fired. That's not really how non-competes work or anything like that. So don't really know how that's going to work for him. But yeah, they're complaining that their IP is being stolen, which is weird to me because while vibe-wise it feels like Twitter 10 years ago, it doesn't look really like Twitter 10 years ago, whereas Blue Sky is egregiously a clone of Twitter's main interface.
Yeah, he just doesn't hate Jack Dorsey the way he hates Zuckerberg. So yeah. But I agree with Nikki that it's interesting because like my social medias are very different. I just use my Instagram to go onto it, and my Instagram has always been my like professional photography travel account, nothing legal tech at all. So it's this weird blending of worlds that I just sort of am sitting back and watching right now because it doesn't make sense to me.
Dennis Kennedy made a point in the chat about sort of why should we have confidence in Mr. Zuckerberg and any privacy concerns, and I have to respond. I have absolutely no confidence that my privacy will be in any way be protected.
I think we waived all of that when we by the fact that most of us are still on Facebook. So it's kind of like, yeah. I mean, if not to be flip about it, but like, yeah, it's kind of like, it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like all social media is going to be like that to an extent. So, and look, Zuckerberg, again, I mean, for me, the ironic thing about the whole thing was that people turning into a political thing, like, oh, Elon Musk is the hero of, conservatives that got censored, blah, 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 but then now Zuckerberg's battling that by, cracking down on fake news. But then, before all this happened, Zuckerberg was the one who enabled a lot of Trump's Facebook posts and whatnot. And I think they had a meeting when he was president. So it's funny to see how like the roles change based on, changing politics, changing, business models and whatnot. So neither of these guys are going to be like are angels or saviors or whatnot. So I don't think, it's one of the things where it's kind of like, well, the fact that people are on social media, like it's almost like you have to understand that, like, okay, well, if there's going to be some kind of invasion of privacy or some kind of like, like waiver of that if you just with virtue of being on it.
Yeah, can't have that meeting with the presidency anymore because the Judge Virus down in Louisiana put out that nationwide injunction saying that the White House and all government agencies can't talk to social media anymore. If you haven't read that, it's 155 pages of complete insanity, but it is nonetheless the law based on how our country does things.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, yeah.
Joe, why would he let such a little thing like facts get in the way or the law? I mean,
Like, yeah, it is a long diatribe about how the apparently we were all misled and COVID isn't real and it's a conspiracy, and yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. I are we still talking about threads? I lost track. I lost the thread of what the heck we are talking about here. Just on threads. I mean, I think the biggest problem with threads, what are they up to, like 70 million users now or something like that? But I feel like the biggest problem with threads is that it isn't Twitter. And I think I just think Twitter was something that was almost like a moment in time that will never quite be replicated. We have all these other applications trying to do that. I thought there was a really interesting uh, Sarah Glassmeyer, who's in the audience here. She does a Substack newsletter that I really liked, and she sent one out today where she wrote in her newsletter. She said, "I don't think there will ever be a single short text-based social media service that completely captures the zeitgeist and allows for multiple cultures to discover each other and interact on somewhat neutral ground like Twitter. And that's a shame." And I think that's really kind of the problem. There's just sort of no replicating what Twitter was at its height. Unfortunately, it's not that anymore. And now with the demise of TweetDeck, it's even worse. But the whole threads thing just doesn't really quite do it for me. And the tie-in to Instagram just really kind of bothers me. I mean, I went through and had to manually unfollow or follow people, whatever. I didn't auto import it because like my Instagram is a whole different world from my social media. I mean, I just post little pictures of the little beach town that I live in and that's it. And has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the rest of my life. And I don't want
Well,
to follow all those people on Twitter or on Threads.
and I'm now
Well,
wishing I
and
had done that too, because they're now making it so that if you did use your Instagram to set it up, which made it so easy to do, if you want to delete threads, you can't do it without deleting your whole Instagram account.
Really?
Which, yeah, I'm
Weird.
assuming that will eventually change maybe, but currently that's what is being said. And I don't want to lose my Instagram account. I'd much rather lose my threads account, but not my Instagram, because that's been there forever, you know?
Of course, you could just leave Threads without deleting the account. I mean, if you never
Yeah.
post again,
True.
we'll never
well,
know.
and it will take it some time to get going. And at some point, I assume that one of these outlets will win out and will either be Threads or Mastodons or Blue Skies. But in the meantime, I find it really difficult to find people on these alternative sites. I mean, I do searches and people that I think would be there, I can't find. So that's kind of a problem.
But I will
Yeah.
echo slightly adapted. I'll echo something adapted that Niki said, which is that I have said consistently from the beginning of Twitter's downfall, the second a competing app develops a version of TweetDeck, they win. I don't know when that's going to happen, but once somebody has that, they win. And now that Twitter doesn't even have TweetDeck, I have no idea who's going to win.
And what was the story? I didn't even know. Like one morning I woke up and started up my TweetDeck and there was like nothing there. And it was telling me I had to log in and set it all up. And I had all these different Twitter accounts. I maintained various Twitter accounts. I had them all set up in there. I had all my little columns set up and like, what the?
They'll now let you see the lists that you have, but nothing else. So you can't see any of your personal feeds or whatever, like just lists. It's broken.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Well, and they were saying
yeah.
they already had said that they planned later this month to make TweetDeck only available to people that have, paid for their verification.
Right.
Pay for that. It's already turned into crap.
Yeah.
Paying for that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I've never been much of a thumb typer, so I need to, like when I'm at a conference and I'm trying to like tweet out from a conference or something, I need the desktop version. So hopefully Threads maybe will come out with the desktop version at some point. I read some conjecture that the reason they didn't have one is simply because they're trying to drive downloads of the app for now, and that once they get a critical mass of people downloading the app, then maybe they'll come out with a desktop version. So I can hope that that happens.
Once they
It took them a long
exploit all the stolen IP that they have from Twitter, then they'll get feedback.
Yeah, yeah.
It took them a long time to even develop like a functional desktop version of Instagram. Like for the longest time, you couldn't upload
Right.
photos from your computer, which may not be a problem for some people, but it's like I had photos on my computer that I liked and I wanted to upload. So I don't know if it's necessarily a priority for them, but who knows? I mean, I'm sure if enough people want it, then they'll probably do it, right? Who knows?
Who
Yeah,
knows?
yeah.
I think there's just also just like this huge social media fatigue, right? Because even if one of these Twitter killers is the Twitter killer, will enough people know? Because we're a very tech centric group, but most people out there aren't going to be like, let me try these 7 new platforms to see
Yeah.
which one I like and test them all out equally. Like there's a point where it's just like enough already.
Well, and the whole point of the social media is to be where the people that you want to be in contact with are, and that's one of the problems now is everybody's kind of spread out. So some point, one of these I would assume will win out. Whether it's the one that I like the best or not, it's probably is irrelevant because it'll be where all of us are. So
How
Or
did,
So-
saying, forget
yeah.
it and just watch this show instead of
well, but like,
we have
how
all the
did
news
everybody-
anyway.
I was not part of like the business world before computers came along. I honestly don't understand how everyone kept in touch. Like, did they really write each other letters? Did they talk
talked.
on the phone a lot? I guess.
We phone called some, yeah. And we didn't even have
Telephone.
voicemails. You had to you would call and you would get an administrative assistant and leave a message and they'd write a little note and they'd stick a note on your desk and you'd come back after vacation and be this many notes.
You'd
No,
crank
I was
the
ta- I was talking
thing
with
and put
people
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to people I went to college with, like it's sort of like what we used to do when we would go out and we'd have to like meet up. It's like I have to call someone's voicemail, leave
Yep.
a voicemail on their voicemail, and then they would have to check it and then respond to me, and then I had to check it again because no one had a phone back then. I mean, I remember one of my friends got a phone, the first person I ever knew that had one, and we were like, "Who do you think you are? You think you're like the president or something? What, you need a phone because someone's going to call you?" So
I was just telling my
shows what we all
kids
knew.
in the student union at University of Rochester, they both go there now. I used to stand in line for that telephone so I could check messages and see where all my friends were going to be, like what parties everybody was going to, because it was all in my voicemail.
Well, I was just going to say, we just had regular bars and we just knew people who would be there and you would show up.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how Joe and I are friends. Even though we went to school together, we didn't know each other from class, really. Yeah.
I mean,
You'd miss people a lot.
to evoke a little bit of tragedy, that is true because on 9/11 I lived down by there and was evacuated because of it. And when I got to my law school bar, the bartenders had been fielding phone calls from people saying, let us know when Joe arrives, because this will be inevitably where he goes when he has no home to go to, because it's the only place where I could get connected with people to take me in,
Wait a minute, you found bars that were open on 9/11? I was in New York that day and I couldn't find a single bar to get to.
Oh, yeah. Well, I
Okay.
mean, some of them were open earlier, right? Like the opening crew came, if it was a bar that opened at noon, like some do for the lunch crowd, their opening group were already in town, so.
And then they just opened their doors for everyone that were strays and wandering in and like, yeah.
So are
I
you
like
saying we
Warren
need to
Hagan
start
posting in
drinking
the
more?
chat.
Go
Warren
ahead,
Hagan
sorry.
posted in the chat that people used to meet in person at lunch, things like that. Because I think, Warren, you can correct me, I think the first time I ever met you was you and I somehow got in touch and had lunch with each other many, many years ago in Boston. So that used to happen.
And someone, it went by too fast, but someone made an excellent point that we just used to communicate with far fewer people.
Yeah.
And not as frequently, unless it
Yeah.
was important. you didn't necessarily have to be meeting with people all the time.
Well, I think that the takeaway lesson is that it sounds like we just all need to start drinking more so that we can prepare for face-to-face interactions and go to a lot of bars.
Yeah, or
That's
we
where
all
we're
just need to
headed.
get off of social media. All right. Well, we actually have some actual like court cases and stuff to talk about this week too. And I don't know which one to start with. Niki, I kind of want to start with yours, even though you kind of already went. But you've got a good case, and maybe we should talk about that, and then move on to some of the other ones. You want to fill us in on that one?
Yeah, it caught my eye this morning. I mean, essentially, the essence of this is that there was a contractual case in Canada that revolved around the idea of whether the thumbs up emoji was an acceptance of the contract. And it was more the headline, and I skimmed the beginning of the article. I'm not going to lie, I didn't read the whole thing. But, the idea that a thumbs up emoji can be considered an agreement, an acceptance of a contract is pretty startling to me. I mean, I think emojis can be interpreted in many different ways. Forget the fact that I don't know what they mean with my Gen Z kids. The emojis that I think mean one thing to them, and even their expressions, I'm dead means it's hysterical. And when they show the dead emoji, that means it's funny. I'm like, that's not funny. But so I don't know how you can even interpret what an emoji means in a way that's sufficient to come to the conclusion that it's an acceptance of a contract. So that to me was kind of a startling and interesting case.
So now you're like the ChatGPT lawyer. You don't even bother to read the whole thing. You just bring it up.
Yeah. You got a problem with that?
No, not at all. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I remember many years ago having to research the issue of what constitutes a signature for the form of a contract. And, people used to think you needed to actually put your signature on paper back in the day. And basically it was, any kind of clear indication of affirmative assent could constitute a signature on a contract. And so I guess it makes sense that a thumbs up emoji would be a indication of assent.
Well, the article goes into a little more because I think they noted that these guys have done a lot of business together, and that it was standard procedure for them to use like very terse responses like "yep" or "okay" or I think that or "looks good" or whatever. So I mean, it'd be one thing if like they had like long back and forths with like lots of different like say, oh, let's change this, let's do that. But I think they were banking on the fact that like these guys generally were on the same page. They were generally, they've done a lot of business together, so they kind of, they knew what the other person was, their mannerisms were, or what, or what their intentions tended to be. But still, yeah, I can see why there would be some lack of clarity behind like just an emoji, like because yeah, maybe the thumbs up was okay, yeah, I got it, or yeah, I'll take a look, it looks, or yeah, it looks good, I agree to it. So but I mean, yeah, but then that kind of puts the onus on people to be a little bit more clear and a little bit more unambiguous with their responses. So if maybe that means texting back 4 thumbs up or something, or
or heart it. What if you heart it instead of thumbs up it?
Yeah, yeah, or you do the poop emoji to mean that you don't agree with it or something. So yeah, but bottom line is you probably shouldn't be using emojis in these kind of contexts unless you really explain beforehand. Okay, this means I'm agreeing to the deal. Like if I put my hand out like this, or we do the handshake thing. So.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking, Victor, there were several times in my career as a practicing lawyer that there would be a dispute whether there had been a settlement agreement or not. And I'm just thinking that I could see some lawyer, giving the thumbs up to some settlement agreement and then say, no, I didn't mean that at all. And I mean, it's almost in every case, though, at the end of the day, if it got to the judge would say, you got a written signed settlement agreement? No, well, then you don't have a settlement agreement. That always turned out.
Well, then eggplant.
Yeah. All right. Well, from there to a first for this show, I think, which is a discussion of forum non-conveniens. Convenience? How do you
Yeah.
even say it? I don't even remember how to say it anymore.
I've always done veniens, but yeah, a forum non-case, which is also about Canada. So we're all Canada, all the Canada court cases all the time today, apparently. So this is a case that I've been following just because it's procedurally a little interesting because it's kind of the flip side of the Dominion case against Fox. So that was a Canadian company suing Fox News for for defamation. This is a Canadian broadcaster allegedly defamed a U.S. charity, and the U.S. charity chose to bring the claim in the U.S., arguing that that's where they suffered all their harm. The flip side of that is it's a lot easier to win a defamation case up there because you don't have actual malice, but they wanted to do it in the U.S. because that's where they felt they suffered harm, whatever. That's neither here nor there for this particular article. What struck me about the most recent opinion in this article, in this case, is that the case gets to stay. It survived its motion to dismiss, or partially. Some claims were kicked, but the forum non argument was denied, and so the case is going to stay in the U.S. But the forum non argument, what got me is interesting about it is it largely turned on some of these legal tech issues we talk about all the time. It's a moment where legal tech actually had a substantive impact on law, not just one about making yourselves a little more efficient or collecting bills a little bit better. You actually could win or lose the case, the argument you want based on it. And what the court determined was all of the Canadian broadcasting companies' arguments why we can't do this in the US because all the documents are up in Canada. And the court was like, what do you mean up in? Just put them in the cloud. We're going to look at them all on some ediscovery platform anyway. And it struck me that this is where we are. And when I started researching a little bit more for this case, I actually found that in 2014 there had been a case where someone had made the argument that, like, look, forum non really doesn't mean anything for documentary evidence anymore because ediscovery. And the court ultimately didn't pull the trigger on it. Said that they were sympathetic to it, but determined that, yeah, no, this case should be in England, whatever. So we've come a long way since 2014. And now we recognize that sometimes these, especially in forum non, which is about what the convenient venue is, the march of technology is going to change what the substance of that body of law says.
Yeah, I mean, let alone e-discovery, just email. I mean, the fact that documents are electronic and can be transmitted anywhere in the world. It's, there is a sort of an e-discovery angle to it because you do have to deal with collecting documents from different custodians and all that sort of an issue, I guess, if it's anything complicated. But yeah, that's really kind of interesting.
Well, yeah, and the other piece of that too is the test. It always hinged on where the documents were and where the witnesses were, and so. But now you can say with remote depositions and Zoom depositions, even where the witnesses are may not be as important as it used to be.
Right. True.
I said something really funny or really stupid because Joe's laughing.
Oh no, I'm just catching up on the comments and
laughing at us.
No, I'm catching up on the comments and learning that no one is listening to me. So
yeah, no, Joe's on Threads right now trying to catch up with what's going on there. All right. Well, so from that case, we have Victor, we talked already about a little bit about, Joe kind of talked about the case that you were going to talk about this week on the judge's ruling on the sort of banning the U.S. government from bugging social media companies, I guess. Is there anything more that you wanted to point out about that?
No, it was a little shocking to read it. I mean, I guess yes and no, right? I mean, but still, yeah. I mean, this idea of like, okay, well, we should be allowed to say whatever we want with no consequences, and you guys can't do anything about it. That's kind of been at the crux of what a lot of these cases and what a lot of these people complaining about, have been after all along. But one thing I kind of like like what people talked about was how it's sort of like took like a Potter Stewart approach to porn. Like, I know when I see it, that never works out. Frankly, it's this whole thing is just one gigantic mess. But you never know what could happen when the case goes up. I mean, the Fifth Circuit tends to be a pretty conservative one. But and then obviously the Supreme Court, there's no telling what they might do. So it'll be interesting.
I did not read, I forget what Joe said, 100 and something pages long. I have not read any of it. But I mean, is there any meat to it at all in terms of the First Amendment issues here? I mean, I read I think it was the quote in the ABA Journal's story saying where the judge said, this isn't the First Amendment applies to everybody, and this is where I'm applying this here without regard to political affiliation or leaning. Is there anything to that?
I mean, it was more like a thing where it was like, okay, the way I read it, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, was that it's one of those like preliminary rulings where it's okay, well, if what they're saying is true, then it would be the most egregious violation of the First Amendment in the history of mankind. So it's kind of like, so the judge kind of like, put this ruling in place but then there would be like, it would then proceed to like whatever the next step is, I guess, discovery or whatever. And then I'm barring appeals and whatnot, but like, so it's more along the lines of like, okay, well, if kind of like, it wasn't a motion to dismiss, but like, or summary judgment, but kind of like looking at it in that vein. If what they're saying is true, that the government stepped in and told the social media platforms, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that, then it would be censorship, even if the what they were saying was to combat misinformation, whatever. So it was more along those lines, but just the fact that like he went that step, and obviously the very quotable lines then got quoted on news channels and political shows and things like that, social media obviously. So it definitely kind of, there was the veneer of like this, okay, well, I'm gonna issue the sweeping ruling about that could potentially upend like centuries of precedent. But it wasn't quite that step, but it was more along the lines of like, well, if we're going to continue with the fact finding, but if you guys are right, then you guys are gonna completely destroy the government on the merits. So that's how I read it. But but obviously the tone and the tone of it, and the fact that like it applied to something like it applied to like the COVID and whatnot, where there was so much misinformation and so much polarization of it, kind of I think definitely kind of made it have more of an impact.
Yeah, like he doesn't go all the way to saying that those efforts that get made by government agencies to be in contact with social media about catching terrorists and stuff, he doesn't necessarily go all the way to that. But the fact that he doesn't go all the way to that is kind of the point, right? Like he goes in this 155-page screed into all sorts of right-wing media, right-wing blogger, not even mainstream media, right-wing blogger driven narratives about how COVID wasn't real and stuff, and like it was all overblown, and they were like trying to push it, which one, say what you will about that, but like it's not really any different than the hype that someone gives over anti-terrorism efforts. And if you think it's a First Amendment violation for one, why wouldn't it be for another? So like his effort to say like, oh, I'm being neutral about this kind of collapses on itself the more exceptions he makes. It was really weird.
Yeah. Did he bring Robert Kennedy into it at all? It could have brought some Democratic
Oh,
focus in.
oh no.
Fake
Steroid
Democrat
boy
Robert
is
Kennedy.
not brought up.
Yeah. But it sounds a little bit like a prior restraint issue. Is that sort of, did they talk about that at all in the opinion? I guess, again, I haven't read the opinion. I don't know if you have, but
Yeah, it's just it's just that the agencies are not allowed to go talk to them for fear that what they're doing is using their power to silence speech. So in some ways, he's kind of arguing that you need this injunction to avoid prior restraints because the agencies are basically bullying social media into squelching speech out of hand is kind of what he's trying to do. But yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, continuing our journey through first year of law school here, we Stephanie has a lawsuit that's been filed that has some interesting implications.
Yes, it's products liability now, but like Niki said, it sounds like an SVU case. A GPS company was sued for its role, and they created a tracker that you can stick under a car, like literally like you see in the movies, that somebody used to stalk and his ex-girlfriend and follow her across state lines and kill her and her new boyfriend. And so the company is now being sued for the product's liability aspect of it. I guess there's a dispute about consent, which the consent argument is really weird to me, but I would start by saying if you don't want a lawsuit like this, you shouldn't name your company Spy Tech. And also it is very much it's advertised as basically like this is a great tool for stalkers. So it's interesting to me because I don't feel like most of the products liability I remember studying was not stuff like this. And like Niki, I like a good SVU case. But the consent argument is weird because they're saying because there's a difference between Missouri law and New York law, and this is a New York case where they're saying it could be more safely designed to need consent, like it has to be placed inside the car. And I'm like, how would you even know?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Spy tech is going to be designed so that the person being spied on has to consent to its
Right.
being placed in the car. Yeah,
But-
that's going to.
Well,
I
but
think it's a pretty tough case for the plaintiffs, to be quite honest, because you always get into this foreseeability and causation kind of issues with things like this. It's the old for want of a nail, the kingdom was lost kind of thing. And so that I won several cases by arguing that you manufacture a product, you're not charged with the duty that somebody's going to commit a crime that might involve your product. For example, you don't have to it's not foreseeable that an arsonist would light a fire in the building and catch your product on fire.
But like, what if
that would contribute to the death or harm of people. So that would be kind of an issue. Yeah, but but foreseeability always kind of gets into, okay, what's really foreseeable in the eyes of the makers? It's foreseeable that somebody would stalk and somebody else and commit murder. But how far back up do you want to go the causation chain
right.
when you do that? But for the fact that somebody manufactured the car, this wouldn't have happened. Okay. At some point you have to say that's just too far attenuated. But
Wait, did you used to
who
defend
knows
these
anymore?
heartless, soulless manufacturers, Steve, in your career?
Most of the time, yes. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
How could you possibly tell?
But I feel like that's where it gets back to this being called spy tech and it really being advertised and promoted for this use. Like you said with the arson example, like if you made matches and put stuff all over it being like the best matches for arson, like that would be a different story, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well,
And
also-
that would get right to the heart of the foreseeability issue. I mean, if you're specifically saying these are great matches for arson, it sort of would suggest it's foreseeable to you that an arsonist would use it for that purpose.
Well, but I don't think that you can manufacture a product and pretend you don't know what it's going to be used for. And I think what comes to mind for me is Apple's AirTags, right? They were created initially for this idea of don't lose track of your luggage, don't lose track of your keys. But what are they being used for oftentimes to the detriment of women is they're super easy to slip into someone's bag. You're on the street and you see a cute woman, you slip it into her bag and to track somebody. And so there's all sorts of TikToks about this because people are getting notifications that someone's following them, and I get them all the time because my family has a bunch of AirTags and, every time my husband shows up, it tells me that he's following me, but
maybe he is.
but like, it's a real problem.
He wants to know what you're doing every Friday afternoon at 3:00.
Not very exciting.
Who are these retrobates that you hang out with every Friday afternoon at 3?
It's nothing suspicious. But it's, this, I think that even if that wasn't what Apple purported that they would be used for, they're being used for that purpose. So you need to start taking steps. If it truly, at that point, you're on notice that your product is being used in a certain way. And particularly if your product is called spy tech or whatever versus AirTag.
Spy tech. Yeah.
But
Well, and to your point, Niki, I mean, that's kind of what Apple did when they first came out. I don't think they had quite the protections that they do now in terms of letting you know that you might be being stalked. So that would lend some credence to your argument.
yeah, credence to my argument. I agree. It was brilliant. No, but
And also like AirTags, I can see more arguable valid uses than hidden under your car trackers. They're things that are meant to be hidden. I mean, again, there's a lot of line drawing And like Sarah just said in the comments, like people don't stop to think, how could your service be abused? But that one seems meant for, it's not like they're marketing it to private investigators, you know?
Well, even that's spying. I mean, there is no, open use for a spy tracking device that hitches by magnetic attachment on the other side of a car. I mean, that's
Whoa,
not something.
whoa. It sounds like somebody's never seen Batman before. Like, they're in that utility belt for a reason.
Batman is spying. That's what he's doing.
Spider-Man also has them, I guess, right? Because he would occasionally drop it. Whatever.
He can just follow with the web thing.
And the thing is like really thin, smaller than an iPhone and black. It's not like the ones you see in the movies where it's like a blinking yellow or blinking red light. Yeah.
Well, if Batman had just put one on the Joker, then he wouldn't have had to use the whole like cell phone thing with like the tracking of
Yes.
like, yeah. I mean, it would have been so much easier than violating my Fourth Amendment rights, right?
The really, really awkward and heavy-handed Patriot Act analogy that we got, yeah, it would have been, he could have done that.
Well, the other problem I think is more often than not the government using these trackers. It's a man trying to, follow his wife or his ex-wife or his ex-girlfriend. I mean, who else is going to be using this realistically?
Well,
Like,
and apparently
so
she
you're-
had already taken all the steps to like block him from tracking her all the other ways, like through find like all the phones and everything. And like, so when those didn't work, he went to spy tech
right.
to solve his problem.
Right. So you're raising issues with a man doing it, and we're raising issues with the man doing it. It's all man doing it.
Yeah,
like
right?
that's what we need to, yeah.
That's the lesson we've learned today. The takeaway from this session.
All right.
Well, I mean, but I would, maybe not so much with spy tech, but a lot of these devices, they do have other uses besides,
Well,
talking.
what hypotheticals?
potential
Give me a
victims.
couple reasonable
Yeah.
hypotheticals that are
Well,
fairly
I mean, if you
common
if you wanted to know where your teenager was going every Friday night and how much he or she was lying to you, or if you wanted
That's
to,
still
if somebody-
spying, Steve. It's just spying on somebody different.
Right, but it's spying in a way that's arguably legal. So there
well,
is that.
and what about the people that are sentenced to home confinement? I can see a use there. You have a
That's the
device put on
government.
the car.
Well, but the government
yeah.
has that theoretically. But what if you have a car in a neighborhood where there's a lot of car theft? It's valuable to have a tracker on it. Like, I can see
someone with
legitimate uses.
dementia, a family member with dementia. You don't want
Yeah,
to
yeah. Avoid silver alerts. Yeah, no, like there are reasons. Like,
Like put one
but
on
I
my
mean,
dog's
this goes
collar,
back to your. This goes back to your original point, though, right? Like, all these technologies begin with a lot of good, valid, logical reasons that then get really ugly. And they just like jump to ugly because, as Stephanie points out, they name themselves spy tech.
Right.
That is a problem.
Not
All right, well,
care
Well,
tech or
stalker
anything like
tech
that.
was taken, so yeah.
finding your keys. All right. Well, to talk about something completely off topic, Steve has a story about legal tech and innovation.
or the lack thereof, maybe. Yeah, it was. This was a Thomson Reuters report that came out not this week, but maybe last week. And I think I read a couple of places that
Didn't they get enough news last week?
may have been the report actually may have been written by Zach Warren, who used to be on the show. But it was what Thomson Reuters did is surveyed about 115 firms and interviewed COOs and managing partners to see how much they had, what kind of strategic plans they had for digital transformation and innovation, which in these days and times is kind of important, right? Because of all the rapidity of change that Chat GPT and other large language models have brought. But the findings were I thought were a little surprising. A great preponderance of the people interviewed said, oh yeah, it'd be really important to have a strategy in place for dealing with digital transformation and innovation. Despite that, about half said they had such a plan, had such a strategic plan in place. And of that, about half of those said, yeah, we have this strategic plan in place, but we really don't have any way to measure how we're doing with the plan, which, is like, what's the old saying? If you want to manage something, you have to measure it. Or if you want, or the other part of that is, if you don't measure it, it doesn't exist. So I suspect that of the half that say they actually had plans, I suspect that's a little wobbly. I suspect that not all of them had an actual plan in place to look at it. And the other thing that occurred to me, I was listening today to Dennis Kennedy's and Tom Miles' podcast, and they had Ivy Gray on of WordRake, and she was making the point that there's a difference between goals and strategies. And I wonder, of these firms that say they have a strategy in place, do they even know what their goal is with the strategy, which is kind of a first step. But it all reminded me years ago when I was having a conversation with Aaron Street of the Lawyers about innovation in law firms, and he said, well, there are firms that really want to innovate, and then there are firms that just want to say they want to innovate. And I kind of had that sense in looking at some of these findings that a lot of these firms wanted to say they had strategic plans in place. When we got right down to it, they probably don't, and they're probably not very robust. The other thing I thought was surprising, that of the firms that said they had a plan in place, only about a third of them actually consulted and talked to their clients formulating the plan, which I thought that was one of the reasons we all existed, was to serve our clients. But who wants to talk to those guys about anything? They're just pains in the butt, right? So it was all kind of surprising as I read through this. Maybe surprising is the wrong word. It's always been sort of, law firms are slow to do things and adopt, and but with everything that's going on, maybe a year from now there'll be a better percentage. But this was a little bleak, at least in my opinion.
I thought that, well, it was bleak. I thought the fatal flaw in the whole survey was exactly the point you just made, which is it's basically self-reporting around innovation initiatives.
Right.
And it's not very reliable to ask law firms how they're doing on innovation, because they're all going to tell you they're doing great things.
Right.
Even if they're downplaying it a little bit in terms of what they're doing, they're probably exaggerating what they're actually doing.
Right.
And I was remembering, I don't think he maintains it anymore, but if you remember, Dan Lina did that innovation index for a while, where he was trying to kind of rank the larger law firms by how innovative they are. And he intentionally did not go ask the law firms about what they're doing. Instead, he tried to come up with sort of objective measures of what kinds of technology a firm is using, or what kind of training they have around technology, or things like that, and then rank them according to that. The problem with that, again, is that it was really hard to keep up, and you kind of still had to rely on their websites and other sources of information that provided some of that information. So even that wasn't objective. But it's, if you ask a law firm if it's innovative, it's going to say, oh yeah, we're innovative.
And that's why I thought that statistic about the firms that actually had some measurables was sort of confirmed a lot of that. That's the first thing you would do with any strategic plan, no matter what. You have to have measurables to see if you're meeting your goals and strategies. If you don't have them, then the plan's sort of meaningless. And so that few percentage that actually said that they had, to your point, Bob, said that they had a way to measure what they were doing, really sort of suggests the very thing you're saying. It's all bullshit.
Yeah.
Well, not all, maybe most of it.
Speaking of measurables, what's a very big measurable is money. And sometimes we learn how much money people in legal tech make. Bob? See, I'm doing transitions for you because you couldn't do them for yourself.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, so there was this story this week. This news came out of, I think it was the Wall Street Journal did a story on the 10 highest paid CEOs in the technology world. And who'd have thunk it, but one of them on the list is a CEO of a e-discovery company. CEO of Disco and Kiwi Camera, and he had a compensation package in 2022 of, was it about $110 million, more than the CEO of Apple, as the article pointed out. In a year in which the company was valued at a total of only, I think, about 500 million, in a year in which the company went public in, was it 2021 that they went public, or 2020? I forget now. But in which their stock pretty much tanked during that year. In fairness, he didn't actually earn all of that. A lot of that was in stock options that he would be entitled to get if the stock performance meets certain targets, or, according to the article, if he leaves the company. So I'd choose leave the company if I were him, because I don't see the stock options meeting any dramatic targets. But it's just a bizarre story. I mean, he's an interesting character in so many ways. Was it the youngest guy ever to graduate from Harvard Law School? He had some controversy while he was at Harvard Law School for posting something that had some racist tones to it. But super bright guy, and always a really interesting guy to talk to, and great at breaking up fistfights in the Empire State Building, as I understand it. But
All right, so yes, that didn't happen. There was a fist fight at a disco party in the Empire State Building, and several of us were waiting to go to that party and didn't get to go because of said fist fight. There is no reason to believe that Kiwi was in any way involved in that, other than I wrote an April Fool's Day thing to these folks, making it seem like I had worked out that he was responsible for it. And a few of them were like, wait, what? So I tried to pull a fast one, but no, that didn't really happen. I'm saying this for all the defamation
if he broke
purpose.
up the fight, it would make him seem heroic. That would be a good thing.
But we did all have to leave.
We did all have to leave
we were
the
outside
party.
the elevator. We were the first people
Yeah.
that couldn't go up because of that fight.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
But I was still just amazed by it, and it made me, one thing it made me think about is how we really have no idea what CEOs of legal tech companies, let alone other tech companies, are getting paid. None of them are public, I mean, except for a couple, and we just have so little information about that. And it would be something that would be really fascinating to know more about.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I read that headline at one point. And then when I think I read your article that it was someone from legal tech, I was so surprised. And never in a million years would I've assumed that the person who was referred to in the article, and I only read the headline, was someone in legal tech. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, with the companies with the CEOs that he was up there with. I mean, it was like Blackstone, sorry. Hertz, Peloton. I mean, yeah, like the fact that he's up there with those CEOs, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, again, in fairness, it said his base salary was 500,000, and almost the rest of that was stock options. But then the year before, he had a salary of $1 million, or maybe that was salary plus stock options again. But not what legal tech journalists get paid. Not quite.
Yeah.
But we're not telling. We're not public. The other CEOs are sitting small, CJ Wester says. All right. On that note, what else? Do we have anything else? I know it. It's just suddenly, I mean, the other funny thing I think is just that for years it felt like the legal tech field was a area of struggling companies, not getting super rich, not making a lot of money. And obviously that's been changing, and the eye-opening, the jaw-dropping rather purchase last week of a couple weeks ago of Case Text, and then hearing about CEOs getting compensation like that just really underscores the fact that this ain't your grandmother's legal tech anymore.
Yeah, now you can win forum non-motions.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
No, but I think Cassandra just did an article yesterday or today looking at, even though investment is down, everything is generative AI right now. Obviously, we know this, but that the few investments we're seeing are that. And there was that French company Mistral who got $110 million funding and doesn't even have a product yet in AI. There's a French AI company. Someone gave them 110 million and they don't have a single product. So
You don't
I
need-
feel like
That
there's
might
you
have
don't
been
need a
Kiwi
pro-
who said, I just happen to have $110 million sitting around. And
yeah,
You don't need
right.
a product or a company to get a Supreme Court decision these days. Why wouldn't you need? Why would you need any to get anything else?
Ooh, or a website, like
yeah. All right. Anything else? We beat these horses dead into the ground. All right. I think that does it for this week. And then who's going to AALL of all of you? Stephanie?
I am.
Sorry, I can't.
Nobody else.
It's a
All
game
right.
time. It's a game time decision for me. So we'll see.
It's the one
Right.
show I want to add to my calendar, and then obviously things came up. But yeah,
Like
I
a
can't make
baby.
it. But I did just register for ILTA officially, so because you
I
have to
did too.
create a weird ILTA email account, I guess. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Which
They
I
make it
really
diff-
thought I had done, but then I also got the email
Right.
being
Me
like, you never did
too.
this.
Me
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yes,
Me too.
it,
And it took
it's
me
everything
20
has to be as
minutes
difficult as possible.
It took me 20
Yes.
minutes to figure out how to change my password because the old one wouldn't work. And
It needs to be 15 characters long, which I understand
Seriously?
is like theoretically the rule, but like, holy cow, like, come on.
But I really thought I had registered before.
Me too.
Who's gonna
Me
who's
too.
gonna
Yeah.
log in and steal my ILTA password? Like, come on now.
That is-
And
that
well,
is
if you are
weird that
coming,
you
if
say that,
anybody who is
Stephanie,
coming to AALL, which Stephanie knows this, but there's also, I think, on Wednesday, which is the last day of that conference, there's the first ever Boston Legal Tech meetup thing or something. I forget what we're calling it, but we brought together a bunch of people who are involved in legal tech in the Boston area, and I'm actually moderating a panel there on, oddly enough, a panel on how Boston is like a hotbed of legal tech development or something, with two of the panelists have nothing to do with legal tech, so I don't quite understand what we're going to talk about, but it'll be interesting nonetheless. So if you're in Boston for AALL, hang around on Wednesday afternoon and come to that as well. It's no Toronto. You're right, Joshua.
True.
All right. That does it for this week, and I hope everybody has a great weekend, and we will be back here again next Friday. I hope to see you all then.
Yeah.
so long, everybody.